Europe in the summer of 1914 looked peaceful on the surface. People were going to work, children were playing in the streets, farmers were harvesting their fields. Nobody walking through the markets of Paris or Berlin or Vienna that June morning had any idea that within weeks the entire continent would be on fire. Within 4 years, 17 million people would be dead. The world they knew would be gone forever, and it would all start with one gunshot in a city most of them had never heard of. But that gunshot did not start the war, it only lit the fuse. The powder keg had been building for decades, and understanding why requires going back not to June 28, 1914, but to the 50 years of mistakes, alliances, rivalries, and ambitions that made that single moment catastrophic. The first real cause was nationalism, the belief that your nation, your people, your culture was not just important but superior. By the early 1900s, nationalism was burning through Europe like a fever. Germans believed in German greatness. The British believed their empire was civilizing the world. The French had never forgotten losing the Franco-Prussian War in '71 and wanted revenge. The Austro-Hungarian Empire was trying to hold together dozens of different ethnic groups, Czechs, Hungarians, Slavs, Croats, all of whom increasingly wanted their own nations. And in the Balkans, the region that would eventually light the fuse, Serbian nationalism was particularly dangerous. Serbia wanted to unite all South Slavic peoples into one country. Austria-Hungary saw this as an existential threat. Two forces pulling in opposite directions, a collision waiting to happen. The second cause was the alliance system, and it turned a regional dispute into a world war almost automatically. Europe had divided itself into two armed camps. On one side was the Triple Alliance, Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. On the other was the Triple Entente, France, Russia, and Britain. These alliances were meant to provide security. The logic was simple. If everyone knows that attacking one country means fighting three, nobody will attack. But the logic had a fatal flaw. It meant that any conflict between any two countries would immediately drag in all the others. Europe had built a mechanism that could turn a single spark into a continental explosion, and nobody fully understood just how automatic that mechanism had become until it was too late to stop it. The third cause was the arms race, particularly between Britain and Germany. Germany, under Kaiser Wilhelm II, had decided it needed a powerful navy to match its growing economic strength. Britain, whose entire empire depended on naval dominance, saw this as a direct threat. Both countries began building warships at a staggering pace. The HMS Dreadnought, launched in 1906, was the most powerful battleship ever built, and it immediately made every other warship in the world obsolete. Germany responded by building its own. Britain built more. Germany built more. By 1914, both nations had spent fortunes on weapons they were desperate to justify. Militarism had taken over. Generals and admirals who had spent decades preparing for war had begun to see it as inevitable, and some had begun to see it as desirable. That is perhaps the most terrifying part of the whole story. The fourth cause was the scramble for empire and the competition, humiliation, and resentment it created. By 1914, European powers controlled 84% of the entire surface of the Earth. Britain had India. France had large parts of Africa. Germany felt it had arrived late to the imperial table and was being denied its rightful place in the world. Every dispute over colonial territory, Morocco, Africa, the Balkans, added another layer of tension, another grievance, another reason for suspicion and hostility. Nations that should have been trading partners were treating each other as rivals. Diplomats who should have been finding compromises were hardening positions. And underneath all of it was a growing belief that conflict was coming regardless, so perhaps it was better to fight now while you were strong than later when your rivals might be stronger. The fifth cause was the failure of leadership at the exact moment it was needed most. When Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, was assassinated in Sarajevo on June 28, 1914, the leaders of Europe had a choice. They could have slowed down, they could have demanded negotiations, they could have used the weeks that followed to find a diplomatic solution. Instead, they escalated. Austria-Hungary issued an impossible ultimatum to Serbia. Germany gave Austria-Hungary a blank check of unconditional support without fully understanding what that meant. Russia began mobilizing to protect Serbia. Germany declared war on Russia. France entered because of its alliance with Russia. Germany invaded Belgium to reach France. Britain entered because of its treaty with Belgium. In 37 days, the entire continent was at war. Not because any single leader wanted world war, but because none of them had the courage, the wisdom, or the humility to step back from the edge. The lesson of World War I is not really about war. It is about what happens when pride, rivalry, fear, and miscalculation all reach their peak at the same moment. It is about what happens when the systems humans build to protect themselves become the very mechanisms that destroy them. The alliances meant to prevent war guaranteed it. The weapons built to deter attack made attack inevitable. The nationalism meant to unite people turned them against each other. 17 million people died, not because of one assassin's bullet in Sarajevo. They died because of 50 years of decisions that nobody corrected in time. And that, more than any battle, any treaty, any date in a textbook, is the real cause of the First World War.
Welcome to Simple History. Never stop learning. Subscribe now for more history. Join us and keep learning.